I want to start off today by getting into I'm going to say annual discussion we have on this channel regarding advanced stats. I've talked about advanced stats. I think they're nice, they're handy. I also think that there's flaws in advanced stats. I do. And I think that while everybody puts together a chart for advanced stats, I think the most important statistics in hockey are still goals. That's when the puck goes in the net and you shot it or went off your skate. Assists, that's when you pass it to the guy who scores or you pass it to the guy who passes it to the guy who scores. Now, I'm going to stop here first. The diminishing returns of say, well, it's a secondary assist, so it's not as nice. I've talked about before, and I've talked about before why I don't care. The idea being, well, it's a secondary assist, so it's not as good as a primary assist. But not all goals are created equal either. And I know there's charts. I know. Don't link me to all the heat charts and all the close-up charts and this chart's brought to you by McDonald's. I don't want to see them. The thing is, if I pass it to the guy over here who takes a shot at the net and it deflects off somebody else into the net, and then a play later I pass it to that same guy who takes the shot and it goes straight into the net without hitting anybody else, you're going to tell me that first pass, well, it wasn't as nice as the second one, because the first one, there was a deflection in front of the net that caused that goal, and the second one, you passed it to the guy who shot it into the net. So it was a much better, higher quality pass. I don't care. I've never cared whether it's a primary or secondary assist. It does not matter. Could not matter less. How many goals did we see in the return that were deflected and off a skate? And you're like, well, that went in off his skate. That's the easiest goal he's going to get. Or empty net. You pass it across to the guy and he just has to just kind of tap it into the net. It's so hard not to go full Happy Gilmore when I say tap it in. But anyways, to me, I don't care if it's a primary or secondary assist. I don't report on it. Points? Points are points. You get goals, you get assists, you get points. I remember when advanced stats came into baseball, and I really liked that. And I thought, well, somebody's going to try to do this for hockey, but it's a pretty simple sport. No. Nope. Plus minus, I talk about how plus minus is very much shooed away by people, but it's not unlike Corsi. So we'll start over here with Corsi. Corsi measures shot attempts, which are shots on goal, shots missed, shots blocked, for or against, and so you have Corsi for, Corsi against, relative Corsi, 5-on-5 Corsi, horsey Corsi. You can have whatever Corsi you want on charts, and after a while your eyes start to bleed, so that's kind of a feature. Then you have Fenwick, which is Corsi without blocked shots. So your Fenwick's going to be pretty good if your Corsi's pretty good, probably. But it's weird to me. So giving a guy credit for taking a shot that misses the net, it sounds like a stat a parent came up with. Like, hey, yeah, your Bobby got a shot on net, but my Jimmy, he almost hit the net, and that's pretty much as good. So I think we should have a stat to say that my Jimmy's shot that hit the glass and then deflected out and killed that poor mascot. You know, that was, what a shot that was. So, and it's one of those things where you're like, hey, he had 10 shot attempts tonight, and I look at the stats and I go, yeah, 2 of them hit the net. Woohoo! 8 of them missed the net. Man, there were Canucks in the 80s that would have loved this stat. No offense to any Canucks from the 80s that are watching. Not that they would probably take any offense from that comment. Because I remember as a kid yelling at the TV, can they hit the net with any of those shots? Because you'd hear Tom Larscheid, the doom word for me is they're buzzing. The Canucks are buzzing around the net. Oh, they're not buzzing, are they? Ah, crap. Never going to score. We're just buzzing. So, yeah. And then there's points per 60. I like this stat. And this is points per... so this is how many points a player gets for every 60 minutes of ice time played. And I've seen people say, why isn't it 15 minutes? Why isn't it 20? Because we need to keep it simple. We don't need to drop it. You have a measurement for all players across the league. It doesn't matter how many minutes you're dividing it by. It's a measurement. Now, here's the thing. These stats are going to depend on your coach. So, much like these stats are dependent on your coach, so are these. So, let's say you got a coach who doesn't trust you. Doesn't trust you in tough situations. Puts you out in easy situations. It could have an effect on some of these stats because they have their offensive zone time, your offensive zone starts and your defensive zone starts, and people are going to say stay away from him because all of his zone starts would tell you he's not very good. What I hear is those zone starts tell me the coach doesn't have faith in him, not that he's not very good, because people will also use advanced stats to be smarter than general managers and smarter than coaches. So they'll look at a guy who's got, a certain amount of points per 60. He's got a good Fenwick, good Corsi, whatever they want to use and say, clearly he's being utilized wrong. But then they'll look at zone starts and go, oh, this is great. This tells me that he's no good. So again, they only tell you part of the story. And it's so weird to me because I'll see a guy go out there and he'll put 2 goals in the net. He's not on the ice for goals against. And I'll say, this guy had a great game. And then somebody will truck out some stats and go, actually, he didn't. But he got 2 goals. See, I think sometimes the obsession with, well, we have to look at all the advanced numbers. Yeah, but who got the most points for their team? Well, that's not the point. That's not what hockey's about, scoring goals and not allowing goals at the other end. What about the shot attempts? The 80s connect shed a tear. Now, we'll come back over to this side of the board. Penalties and minutes. I know there's actually, depending on which fantasy hockey you're a part of, you might get points for penalties and minutes. It's always driven me nuts that people see PIM and go, well, what does that stand for? It's penalties in minutes. So, even though it's just listed as penalty minutes now, but it's actually penalties in minutes. And I think the NHL site still lists it as penalties in minutes if you look at it on their official chart. Although it'll just say penalty minutes on the stats sheets you look at. So it's just one of those things. So if you wonder what's the I for in, it's penalties in minutes. Now, honestly, the one thing with penalties in minutes that I've always wondered is, and there's an advanced stat somewhere because I know there is, good penalties versus bad penalties. So if you deny the other team a scoring opportunity, I think that's a good penalty. Your goaltender's out of position and you take a penalty holding a guy or tripping a guy because he's going to score. That's a good penalty. Punching a guy in the face behind the other team's net and getting a roughing penalty, that's a bad penalty. Punching a guy in the face after you've scored a goal to celebrate the goal and getting a penalty, that's a bad penalty. You take a hook. You take a hook from a player, you're going to get a power play, you decide to turn around and bop the guy over the head with a stick, so you take your team off the power play, that's a bad penalty. The guy hooking you may have taken a good penalty because he drew you off the ice. I don't think all penalties are created equal. So, I'm just throwing that out there. I think that penalties, depending on game situations, depending on the end result of that penalty, you can look at some being good and some being bad. Ice time is an interesting one as well. So we can look at a player and say, this player, has 20 minutes a game. This one has 17 minutes a game. So that's where it gets interesting too, because especially with defensemen, if they play more minutes per game, they should score more. However, it depends on the situations. Then you get into all the 5-on-5, all the 5-on-4, 4-on-5. If you want to get into the advanced stats game, there's an advanced stat for you because there's so many of them. XG just stands for expected goals, which admits that Corsi's got a flaw of not measuring shot quality. That's when you get into your high danger chances for, your high danger chances against. Does this player bring his line mates down? Does this player bring his teammates down? And it's all subjective. That's the thing. Especially does a player bring his teammates and line mates down? I'm going to mention Patrick Laine because I think it's worth mentioning at this point. There were stats, and I haven't looked for this year, but I know there were a lot of stats for last year that showed that Laine brought down his line mates defensively, and that there were a lot of high-quality chances against the Jets when Laine was on the ice. But, again, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, so why? Is that just Laine, or is it a bad fit? If you're out with guys that you don't fit well with, yeah, you're probably going to see chances at the other end of the ice. Doesn't make you a bad player, but that's kind of the way it happens. And again, this is where ice time kind of comes into it too, where you might see a guy who's playing 12 and a half minutes a game, and his advanced stats tell you he's just awful. But he may be in a situation where the coach doesn't have a lot of faith in him. Maybe he doesn't click with his line mates, and it's just a bad fit. And one thing that all of the charts in the world won't tell you is it a bad fit? Because in the end, and numerous sites will kind of admit to this, what all of the other advanced stats and all of the extra stuff tries to tell you is, how is this player going to play next year? And that's the great beyond, right? So last year, Neil Pionk was one that I defended it with the Rangers. And there were all these charts that would come out and, oh, he's just awful. Look at all these charts. This is terrible. And there were legit people on my channel saying, you can't defend this guy, or your channel's reputation's on the line. And I kept saying, but I think he's a good defenseman. And then he went to Winnipeg, and he had a good year. He was in a new situation, new coach, new teammates, new line mates. Ta-da! The one thing that all of these stats won't tell you is experience. So rookie defensemen, for instance, will often have poor advanced stats. Some of them don't. But then the question I have to ask is, so have they been playing against men in college? Have they been playing against kids in junior? And again, it comes down to coaching. It comes down to a lot of different things. Quinn Hughes, for instance, in Vancouver. There are situations Quinn Hughes would be playing on the ice in Vancouver that he might not be if he were in Colorado. Where Jared Bednar might say, hey, Quinn, you're a great young defenseman, but we've got somebody else we'd rather have on the ice right now in this situation where we're up by a goal. No offense, but we think defensively this player will be better. And that's to me part of the reason why I only use this as part of the picture. So if I see, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. But the other part that to me is really interesting is, even when you get into all the weeds of all of the stats and everything, it's close. So when I look at all these numbers and all this fancy stuff and I go, okay, so this defenseman shows that he's better than that defenseman, but it's still close if you look at it over an 82-game schedule. It's still a situation where, yeah, maybe you end up with a high danger chance against if you have this guy in the ice rather than that guy. But I still think this guy's a better player. So that's, and then I might look at those situations and go, well, look at who his defensive line mate is. Look at who that guy's line mates are. Look at the coach. The coach is better in that city. And so this is where, again, it's part of it. It's part of the picture. So when I'm coming up with who I think are the best players at a position, the advanced stats aren't as important. A lot of it is, honestly, it's an opinion I have from watching as much hockey as I do. Nobody watches every single game and takes every single stat from every single game because nobody has the time. And that's what I was told when this channel started out. You have to watch the advanced stats. You have to take these as gospel, because you can't know as much as those people do. The thing is, these stats are taken from play-by-play sheets, game summaries. And some of this, what you consider a hit, what I consider a hit might be two different things. What you consider a giveaway or takeaway, what I consider a giveaway or takeaway might be two different things. Good example is during the playoffs. I'm trying to remember which game it was. That there were giveaways happening at both ends of the rink, tons of them. And the announcers say, according to the NHL, there's only been 2 giveaways in this game. And there had been way more than that. Way more than that. So if you look at the stats after the game, you go, wow, defensively that was a pretty clean game. I didn't watch it, but it looks like it was pretty clean. And anybody actually watching the game would go, wow, this is some sloppy hockey. There's some really sloppy play going on out here. Huh. And again, I think that there are those among hockey fans who will use all of the stuff on this side of the board to try to prove, hey, I'm smarter than the general manager. Yeah, Yzerman's pretty smart, but look at that guy he picked up. I mean, his Corsi numbers are bad. His points per 60. Did you see his PDO? His PDO is just awful. And honestly, Honestly, if you look at his high danger chances for or against, good luck getting that out of your own zone. Yeah, we're going to be fishing the puck out of net a lot with that guy. He has got some scary stats. And, I mean, if you compare his stats to that guy was way better. And he was less expensive. I can't believe we paid, what, $3 million for that guy? Yeah, that's going to work out really, really well. You can't govern just by advanced stats. And you can't measure a player just by advanced stats. But what I've found is you can use anything to make a player sound as great or as poor as you want to. Because, again, you can look at all these numbers and go, they're protected. Those are protected minutes. Yeah, his numbers are really good, but he plays protected minutes. Which is that, yeah, Sergachev had a really good year 2 years ago. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about 2 years ago when I was talking about how good Sergachev was, and people were answering me with, yeah, but he plays protected minutes. He's never out there in any dangerous opportunities, so he's not really that good. So yesterday I did the top 20 defensemen. I did not have Sergachev in my top 20, and then I just picked the next 21 names that came to mind. Sergachev was not one of those names that came to mind. McDonough was. And Sergachev's problem is he plays on the same team as Hedman. If he's going to win a Norris Trophy, he has to be better than Victor Hedman. So for him to get a lot of attention, he has to be at least nearly as good as Victor Hedman. And to that I say good luck, because Hedman is fantastic. He's the best defenseman in the league. And I'm sure that there's all kinds of charts you can find to tell you he is. And I'm sure there's charts people can find to say, actually, he's not. You want to see the advanced stats crowd go nuts. You just get a whole bunch of them set up in front of webcams. And then when they reveal who won the Selke for Best Defensive Forward Award, you're going to collectively see a bunch of, seriously, NHL. Or when the Selke finalists are announced, there's going to be a lot of that reaction as well. So again, it's part of the picture, part of it. And how much you want to dive into this, I think it's going to get a lot worse. And I don't want to say worse. I don't, because it's interesting. But it's going to get really aggravating when the NHL's doing all the player and puck tracking. And people are using that again to try to say, well, clearly this player's better than this player. And that general manager's a moron because he can't see it. Well, the general manager is legit sitting there watching every single game from above like he's the god of it. And fans are going, actually, if you looked at this chart here, Mr. General Manager, you'll see that actually that game you watched, you missed all of this. General manager's going to go, thanks, and then hit you in the head with the paper. As if anybody writes anything down on paper, he'll take your tablet and fling it. So don't do that. But yeah, there you go. So my annual look at advanced stats and my relationship with them. I do look at them. I go, that's interesting. And that's about as far as it goes. I do not see them as empirical proof that player A is better than player B. But I know that's what everybody's looking for. And I say this all the time. People want to use math to prove their point. It's a point that they think that a defenseman is or isn't a dingus. And then in that way, some fans really become a stats dingus themselves. That's the term I'm going to use. Stats dingus, where that's all they care about. They don't get into goals and points, and I think it's hilarious when I'll talk about how great a player is who's got like 100 points. Somebody go, but their advanced stats, they got 100 points. Dear Lord, yeah, but they're bad in their own zone. Right, because they're an offensive player. Are you new? Are you new to the league? Because that's kind of been the way things have gone all the way through hockey. And yeah, so here we are. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And hey, don't be a stats dingus. They're fun. They're great. It'll prove that, if you want to say that the best defenseman in the league is Jack Johnson, you might be able to find a stat that will prove that somewhere. And hey, kudos to you for doing that. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, just tap it upon this video, and I will talk to you guys again soon.